Leto is a lonely soldier who dedicated his life to fighting alien monsters on behalf of humanity. However, everything changes when he accidentally wakes up on an abandoned planet with hot girls, so he uses his space tool to crack everyone. The story starts billions of years after Earth died, and humanity moves on to a new utopia called Avalon, controlled by the Galactic Alliance of Humankind. However, humanity faces a dangerous threat in the name of Hidaoze, giant alien squids, so they task pilots to continue research on how to survive and defeat these evil calamaries. One day, our boy, Leto, is sent on a mission to attack the aliens' nest, which goes wrong with a lot of casualties. Their commander, Kugel, sacrifices himself so Leto can return home, but before Leto gets to do so, he gets attacked by an enemy, and it drags him into a wormhole that transports him somewhere far away. 6 months later, Leto's mecha is stranded somewhere unknown, and when he wakes up, he sees people on the outside trying desperately to open up the robot. Chamber quickly analyzes them and informs Leto that the language they're speaking is similar to humanity's ancient languages, but that they're not part of the Galactic Alliance. Leto assumes that they are people who refuse to join the alliance called the Drifters, and decides to wait it out. Hours later, all the Drifters leave the scene, leaving the mecha all alone, and Leto quickly comes out of his hatch to check his surroundings. Despite the horrible smell of fish, piss, and sweat, Leto is surprised to find out that the atmosphere is perfect for humans to live in. Just then, he hears noises coming and quickly hides. He then sees a girl named Amy and a mechanic named Pinion coming back to check on the mecha out of excitement and curiosity. However, Pinion notices footsteps on the ground and quickly tells Amy to get away from the robot. But before she gets to do so, Leto already takes Amy hostage and speaks to Pinion in a language he doesn't understand. When Pinion approaches, Leto shoots his laser gun at his feet and runs away with Amy on his back. Pinion then triggers the alarm, and soon, everyone wakes up. Hearing this, Leto orders Chamber to map out the whole place and analyze the girl's language, while he runs around buying Chamber some time. Then, more drifters show up to chase Leto down, and Leto manages to escape them and run upstairs. When he gets outside, it shocks him to see a world that is so familiar to Avalon, but is so different. Suddenly, Amy's pet squirrel attacks him, forcing him to release Amy. In that moment, the whole fleet corners him, making him face countless barrels of guns, with nowhere else to go. However, Leto decides to show them his own weapon and calls up Chamber, and within seconds, the giant mecha flies out of the building, terrifying the drifters with its aura farming. Leto then asks Chamber about his analysis of their location, and Chamber informs him that from everything they learned, they are on the planet they left for dead eons ago, Earth. Leto is stunned by what he's hearing, as all he knew was that this ocean-covered world should have remained trapped beneath ice for millions of years. Just then, a group of armed locals arrives alongside several low-grade robots, prepared to deal with him and his robot. To counter it, Chamber rises into the air and positions itself in front of Leto as a shield. Chamber suggests that they simply slaughter everyone, but Leto refuses and chooses a more peaceful approach. He orders Chamber to communicate with the locals in their language and explain that they mean no harm. When Chamber begins speaking, the crowd is shocked to hear their language coming from the machine, but it makes them think that a person may be hiding inside it. Then, a woman named Rigid arrives, and as their fleet commander, she takes responsibility for questioning the newcomer. With their language, Chamber explains that they have come from outer space and starts rambling about humanity's war against the Hidaoze, an alien species that threatens mankind's survival. Unfortunately, nobody there has ever heard of the Hidaoze and has no idea what Chamber is talking about. Then, Rigid demands that whoever is piloting it come outside, but Chamber immediately clarifies that nobody is controlling him and that he is operating independently. The revelation leaves Rigid amazed by the advanced technology standing before her. Some hours later, Rigid speaks with Amy, and from her she learns that Leto never truly harmed her during their meeting. Amy also explains that he appeared confused and lost, almost as if he needed help finding his way back home. Rigid then questions Bellows, the red-haired, busty mommy leader of the excavation team responsible for recovering Chamber from the ocean, and Bellows reports that she found nothing unusual during the recovery operation and simply followed Pinion's instructions. Pinion quickly proposes dismantling the giant robot and selling its parts so everyone can retire with stacks of money in their pockets, but nobody else supports the idea. Rigid then brings Commodore Fairlock to join the discussion through the radio, and Fairlock sternly tells them not to engage Leto or Chamber with hostility. Fearing that Leto has reinforcements ready, especially after seeing how advanced his technology is. Meanwhile, Leto discusses with Chamber about their situation, and Chamber once more suggests that they completely take over the place. But Leto reminds him that they have no way to communicate with the Galactic Alliance, so Leto insists that they use the historical records of these Earthlings. He then adds how the Galactic Alliance has been looking for a habitable planet, and now sees that Earth is alive. He suggests that they tell the Alliance to move there. Elsewhere, Amy continues her delivery route, and some of her friends stop her to ask about the mysterious newcomer who took her hostage. They wonder if he is handsome, tall, and is packing that juicy meat. But Amy dismisses their questions and uses her hand glider to continue delivering packages throughout the fleet. Eventually, she returns home and visits her bedridden younger brother, Bebel, and the first thing this little jit asks her is whether the strange alien boy hurt her. Amy assures him that Leto didn't hurt her, and even describes him as a skinny weakling with thin arms who looks like he has too much estrogen. Bebel then becomes excited by the idea of someone arriving from space and wishes that he could meet Leto and spend hours talking with him. Remembering an ancient legend, Bebel explains that Earth supposedly froze over millions of years ago, forcing humanity to abandon the planet. He wonders if Leto might be one of those descendants who has somehow returned. Amy dismisses the story as fantasy, considering that they found Leto from the ocean, but wonders whether there's truth to what Bebel says. That evening, because everyone is too much of a wuss, Amy is assigned to start a one-on-one dialogue with Leto. Nervously approaching him, she offers him a dried raw fish. Having spent his life eating advanced space rations, Leto has no idea what she expects him to do, so Amy demonstrates by grabbing the fish and swallowing it like how your mama swallowed goon.
Bombastic side-eye.
Chamber analyzes the situation and suggests that the food is probably intended as a gesture of friendship. Accepting the idea, Leto eats a fish as well, and with the ice broken, Amy begins asking questions about where they came from. Leto simply points toward the sky, indicating their origin among the stars, surprising Amy, who sees that Bebel is correct. Amy continues questioning them, and when Amy asks to see Chamber's face, Leto opens the cockpit and reveals the truth that Chamber is a fully functional computer that helps Leto in his mission, and has a voice of its own. The discovery excites Amy so much that she starts bouncing around, and when she finally settles down, Leto asks questions about Earth. Amy explains purely from what she knows and says that the planet was once covered in ice, but the frozen surface eventually melted and transformed the world into a vast ocean. She then explains how humanity adapted by living aboard enormous fleets, drawing energy from the sea, and navigating using glowing currents known as the Sea Galaxy. She explains that the vessel they are currently on belongs to a floating civilization called Gargantia. Later, Amy reports back to the others, and while she's fully convinced that Leto is telling them the truth, the others are still suspicious, so Ridget sends Bellows to investigate the area where Leto and Chamber were originally found. But then, in her search, a large pirate force suddenly attacks Gargantia, equipped with advanced technology, including combat kites capable of overwhelming the fleet's defenses with ease. Bellows and the others are spinning their heads, not knowing how to handle this sudden attack from the pirates. However, Amy rushes to Leto and begs for his assistance. She knows how powerful he and Chamber are, and believes they represent Gargantia's best chance of survival. Recognizing an opportunity to earn the fleet's trust, Leto immediately agrees. He climbs into Chamber and flies off towards Bellows' attack ship. There, the pirates manage to corner Bellows and her crew, demanding that they surrender and be their concubine baby mamas instead. But before they start getting freaky, Leto flies high up above the pirates, scaring everyone watching. Then, within seconds, Chamber tags all the enemies within the fleet and shoots out lasers that only target the enemies, leaving Bellows and the others unharmed. Seeing this, Amy and the others are in awe, seeing what true power looks like compared to what they have. After effortlessly crushing the pirate attack, Leto returns to Gargantia, expecting a hero's welcome. Instead, he is met with hostility by the people there, and is confused about what he did wrong. Just then, Amy rushes over with her squirrel and demands that he explain what happened to the pirates. Calmly, Leto tells her that the pirates have turned to dust, and that Bellows' crew is no longer in danger. Hearing that, Amy becomes furious because eliminating the pirates was never what she wanted. She had expected him to stop them, not wipe them out completely. Soon afterward, the fleet's leaders gather to discuss the aftermath, with the death toll weighing heavily on everyone. Some are troubled by the loss of human life, while others fear that surviving pirates may seek revenge. Ridget strongly argues that Leto should be removed from the fleet as soon as possible, and another crew member even suggests handing him over to the pirates as a bargaining chip. The Commodore immediately rejects the proposal, insisting that their priority should be discovering what the pirates intend to do next and dealing with Leto afterward. Later, Amy is pondering whether asking for Leto's help was a mistake when suddenly, Bellows shows up, asking for her help. Then from the skies, Amy and Bellows land near Leto, and Amy quickly apologizes for losing her temper earlier. Bellows then approaches him and presents him with a gift in the form of raw chicken. The offering catches Leto completely off guard, but he politely accepts it anyway. The three sit together and make some barbecue chicken. While cooking, Bellows thanks Leto for rescuing her during the battle. However, she also explains that Gargantia is very different from the battlefield he is accustomed to, saying that on this planet, taking a life is considered the biggest taboo, even during conflict. Leto then questions their logic, asking why they would then hunt down fish and chickens for food. Bellows admits that people hunt and raise animals because they need food to survive, not because they enjoy hunting them. Leto follows up by asking why they carry weapons if they dislike violence so much, and Bellows explains that weapons are necessary for protection, acknowledging that dangerous people exist, and pirates regularly threaten fleets like Gargantia. She adds that being prepared to defend themselves is important, but even so, she emphasizes that pirates are still human beings and should not be treated as if they are pests. Leto quietly listens, and while he doesn't agree with their ways, he begins to understand that the people of this world operate under a very different set of values. Before leaving, Bellows gives him a communication device so future misunderstandings can be avoided, and he accepts it. Sometime later, news arrives that the pirate queen herself, Luckage, has learned about the destruction of her forces. A lone survivor manages to reach her and reports that an unknown machine wiped out the attacking fleet. Furious, she immediately orders a full-scale assault against Gargantia with the goal of demolishing the whole fleet. Back at Gargantia, Commodore Fairlock receives reports that nearly 30 pirate ships are approaching, and things become even worse when he learns that Luckage is personally leading the attack. One officer suggests fleeing before the pirates arrive, but Fairlock quickly dismisses the idea, saying that Gargantia simply lacks the speed to escape an enemy force of that size. Some suggest giving up Leto to them, but they also get dismissed out of fear that Leto will join their side. With options running out, Bellows proposes asking Leto for help again. She believes their earlier conversation made an impact, and this time, she thinks he can fight without resorting to lethal force. Although both Ridget and Fairlock remain hesitant, they eventually agree because no better solution exists. Using the communicator, Ridget goes to talk to Leto. She first asks if he understands his mistakes, and Leto fully acknowledges that he caused the situation they are facing. Then, she asks if his robot is capable of wiping out their whole fleet, and Leto assures her that he is more than enough to destroy the whole of Gargantia. Hearing that, Ridget asks why he's willing to help, and Leto says that he wants to trade. He explains that his fleet shows him enough that they are good people from their rules alone, unlike the pirates, who are willing to take lives. For his assistance, he requests to be accepted as a member of Gargantia, and the Commodore agrees. Then, they talk strategy, and Leto agrees to act more as a distraction, while ensuring to keep human loss to a minimum. While others doubt Leto's ability, the Commodore puts his full faith in him to protect them. Then, that night, Luckage leads her armada across the sea under the cover of darkness. Confident in her abilities, she boasts that nobody can match her when it comes to nighttime assaults, but her speech is interrupted when a powerful light suddenly shines across the battlefield. When they look up, they see Chamber lighting them, and the pirates immediately open fire, but Chamber avoids every attack with ease. The battle erupts moments later as missiles and gunfire fill the sky, and despite their best efforts, Gargantia's defense loses its best weapons early on. When Leto sees that his team is losing numbers quickly, he decides it is time for him to even the odds. Using Chamber's advanced systems, he launches a highly precise counterattack. Instead of targeting crews, he focuses on engines, weapons, and critical equipment. The people of Gargantia watch in amazement, as unlike before, Leto is not fighting to eliminate enemies. He is fighting to protect lives. Suddenly, Luckage launches her own attack, riding in her own mecha called the Surfing Lobster. With ease, she races across the water and reaches the main fleet. She then starts climbing up towards where the Commodore is located, itching to blow his brains out. However, Leto intercepts her, and he directly lands behind her like a dog trying to reach and hump his wife. But then, two of Luckage's followers pop up and attempt to pull him away using motorboats. Luckage starts boasting, saying that Tay Ocean is her domain, and that she will make Leto drown with the fishes. However, Leto tries warning them to surrender, and when they refuse, he takes off into the sky, dragging Luckage and her two baby mamas with him. He once again demands Luckage to surrender, and when she claims that she would rather die before surrendering, Leto says bet. He then starts swinging them around like a dude swinging his willy to drop the last bit of piss, and the lobster gets ruptured into two, resulting in Luckage getting yeeted far away. Seeing their hot and busty pirate captain defeated, the others quickly retreat, seeing that what they are facing is way above their pay grade. With the battle finally over, celebrations spread throughout Gargantia, and Amy excitedly approaches him carrying fishes as a gift. Trying his best to gel in, Leto thanks her in their own language, marking another step toward Leto becoming part of Gargantia. The following day, the fleet starts fixing and rebuilding itself. Leto tries to help out, but years of military training have left him a complete donkey in terms of ordinary labor, as his attempt to make Chamber lift cargoes keeps going horribly wrong. He then looks at the document he received from Ridget, where she told him that it resembled his permission to live there for the time being. She then informed him that he would be given free water and electricity, but had to be responsible for covering damages caused during the previous battle, which would be paid through Chamber's assistance for future needs. Amy tried to complain, but Leto assured her that it would be fine. Just then, a worker approaches him and asks if Chamber would take orders from someone else apart from Leto. After checking, Leto says that it can, and that gives the worker an idea. An hour later, Pinion spots him chilling by himself and Chamber working from direct orders from the workers, and Pinion tries to complain, but Amy shuts him up. Amy then approaches Leto, and her attention quickly shifts to the unusual object he has in his hands. Leto explains that the item is actually a Hidao tooth that he put holes in, but he doesn't know why he does it. Seeing that she's interested, Leto simply offers it to her, considering he has more than one, and Amy happily accepts the gift. Then, Amy gets a great idea and invites Leto away from the work area to walk with her through the fleet instead. As they wander through the marketplace, Amy starts talking about her younger brother, Bebel, who has been eager to meet him. But Leto has no clue what a brother is and asks her. Amy stares at him in disbelief and understands that, from where he's from, he has no understanding of family relationships or emotional attachments. Seeing her confusion, Chamber consults historical records, and according to it, family refers to people who share close bonds through blood. Trying to move the conversation forward, Amy begins talking about Bebel's intelligence, and proudly explains that her brother loves studying subjects related to space. However, due to a serious illness affecting his chest, he cannot live as actively as everyone else. Hearing that, Leto reveals that in his society, people who are physically incapable of fighting are considered burdens and would be discarded. Amy is horrified by the statement and asks if he's fine with the way his society works, but Leto doesn't understand her question. He then asks if talking to her brother will give him intel, and Amy suddenly has an idea. She decides to introduce him to the smartest person in the fleet, Dr. Oldham. When they get to his cabin, the doctor is intrigued by Leto's presence and is open to hearing his questions. Leto immediately asks how he can return to the Galactic Alliance, but Oldham has no answer. The doctor explains that much of humanity's ancient technology has disappeared over the centuries, and the knowledge required for space travel is largely gone, making it unlikely that anyone aboard Gargantia can help him return to the stars. Although disappointed, Leto continues questioning him and asks what purpose the fleet serves and why it supports people who contribute so little. He criticizes the community's efficiency and dismisses the education given to children as inadequate. Rather than taking offense, Oldham laughs, finding Leto's perspective amusing, and suggests that he speak with Bebel instead. According to the doctor, the boy possesses a remarkable amount of knowledge. Right after, Amy takes Leto to meet with Bebel, and the young boy is thrilled to speak with someone who has actually traveled through space. Just then, Amy's friends arrive, and when they see Leto there, they tease Amy for already trying to add family members through the act of cracking cheeks.
Bombastic side eye.
Embarrassed, Amy quickly escorts them outside, leaving Leto and Bebel to talk alone. Bebel then asks about life beyond Earth, and Leto says that his existence consists almost entirely of warfare and obedience, where every day revolves around following orders issued by the Galactic Alliance and participating in endless battles. Bebel then asks what Leto would do if the war ended, and Leto says that he would simply wait for the next command, because that is all he has ever known. Bebel then asks what would happen if the command never comes, and Leto says that he will simply wait. Hearing that, Bebel claims that waiting is exactly what the people there are doing, saying that they are simply living. Afterward, he returns to the fleet's main work area, where he tells Bellows that outside of controlling Chamber, he feels completely useless. Bellows is about to give him some advice when it suddenly starts raining. Leto quickly panics, but Chamber informs him that it's a simple weather reaction. Around him, workers scramble to collect the fresh water, and Bellows asks him to help out with getting the water. Seeing everyone so hopeful just to get water, for the first time in his life, Leto feels less like a weapon and more like an ordinary member of a community. Later, Amy notices that he is completely soaked. Concerned, she brings him back to her home so he can dry off. There, Bebel talks to him again and asks whether there is anyone important enough to make Leto abandon his old life. Bebel explains that despite his illness, he continues living because of his love for his sister. Leto dismisses the idea, as in his view, emotional attachments only weaken people. Bebel then points out something interesting, that if feelings are truly meaningless, why did Leto keep the alien teeth with holes for so long? Leto has no answer for him. Then Bebel points out that it's a flute, which confuses Leto. To demonstrate, Bebel takes the item and begins playing it, and the gentle melody triggers something inside Leto. Memories buried deep within his mind suddenly resurface, and he recalls a man placing the object into his hands before departing on a mission long ago. Before he realizes what is happening, tears begin running down his face. Bebel immediately asks whether he is alright, and Leto cannot answer properly because he does not understand the experience himself. After gathering himself, he asks for the object back, and Bebel gladly returns it. That night, Leto asks Chamber whether any signals have been received from his fellow soldiers. When Chambers says that there are not, Leto admits that he wants to learn more about Gargantia and the people living there. The following day, Leto once again finds himself doing very little aboard Gargantia. As he sits around thinking, he questions what purpose he will have once the war against the aliens is finally over. Determined to stop dwelling on it, Leto decides he needs a job. He asks Chamber to analyze the available opportunities and recommend something suitable, but Chamber quickly crushes his hopes and points out that Leto lacks most of the skills needed aboard the fleet, with his talents limited almost entirely to combat. Frustrated, Leto takes out his flute and attempts to play it, but even then, he still needs blowing practice from OnlyFans girls. Amy arrives carrying an envelope, and inside is the payment for the cargo work he performed the previous day. Leto stares at the money with complete confusion, no idea what the papers of money are, and Amy is surprised and asks whether people in space never receive wages. Chamber explains that citizens of the Galactic Alliance are not allowed to own personal property in the way Gargantia's residents do. The conversation only deepens Leto's feeling that he contributes very little, and wanting to change that, he asks Amy to help him find proper work, to which Amy agrees. The two immediately set off through the fleet's narrow passageways in search of employment. Their first stop is a mechanic's workshop, and while the owner is willing to give Leto a chance, he explains that he recently hired additional workers and has no openings available. Then, Amy leads him to the fishing division. She assumes there must always be work there, but the head fisherman has bad news that, since they recently lost access to a major current, fishing activity has slowed dramatically, leaving most of the crew with little to do. Then, Amy takes Leto to Bellows, but Bellows delivers the same answer that every available position has already been filled by experienced workers. Amy feels terrible after promising to help Leto find a job, and has nothing to show for it. Leto, however, tells her not to worry about it. When Amy eventually leaves to continue her delivery route, he decides to continue searching alone. He explores nearly every corner of the fleet. His wandering eventually leads him to the agricultural section, where numerous cows are being raised. The moment he catches the smell coming from their big old doo-doo,
Brother,
he immediately runs away faster than your daddy to get milk. Just as he escapes, the fleet's engines gradually power down, bringing the massive ship to a stop. At that moment, Pinion appears and tosses a bright red shirt toward him, telling him to put it on and follow him. Confused, Leto asks what is going on, and Pinion explains that the fleet has reached a region of calm water and is temporarily stopping operations. Later, Pinion gathers Leto, Amy, and Bebo, leading them to a secluded area of the fleet. To Leto's surprise, they are preparing for a party. Amy points out that the fleet should probably focus on maintenance while stopped, but Pinion insists that everyone deserves a break once in a while. When they arrive, Pinion proudly reveals a beautiful location hidden away from most residents, and Amy's baddie friends are there too. Then, Chamber joins them as well, landing nearby with enough force to shake the surrounding area. Then, the girls change into their swimsuits, giving us viewers a break with their fan service, but they encourage Leto to join them to show them what he's hiding. He resists at first, but eventually gives in, and the girls very much like what they are seeing. Then, they all enjoy themselves in the water, while Pinion begins preparing food for a barbecue. Unfortunately, he realizes there is no electricity available to power the equipment. He asks Leto if Chamber can help out with that, and when Leto asks Chamber to fry the meat, Chamber turns them into atoms, annoying everyone there. But then, Pinion suddenly remembers an important ingredient he forgot to bring. He quickly hands Leto an address and asks him to retrieve it from a local blacksmith. Amy and the others worry that sending him alone may not be the best idea, but Leto volunteers without hesitation and immediately heads off. While the girls remain behind enjoying themselves, Pinion notices that Chamber's metal frame has become extremely hot under the sunlight, which gives him a great idea. Meanwhile, Leto arrives in a rougher part of the fleet, and there, he encounters the Thailand girls of the fleet, all wanting him to join their pretty boy crew, prompting Leto to run away out of fear for his poor Willie. Back at the party site, more baddies show up in the form of Bellows, who heard about the party from Amy, and Rigid, who decides to serve up her baddie look to skyrocket herself as the #1 waifu. Elsewhere, Amy and her friends are racing through the air using their gliders. As they approach the top of a nearby structure, they suddenly spot Leto sprinting up a tower with the pretty boy crew chasing him, all wanting a piece of his sweet cheeks. Suddenly, Leto falls down, but Amy swoops down with her glider, grabs Leto, and carries him away. Together, they fly toward the top of the tower, and Leto genuinely smiles for the first time. Then the girls activate a network of water sprinklers and cool water cascades across the area, creating a refreshing fountain effect that helps cool part of the fleet. After taking a short break, the girls finally drop Leto off near the blacksmith shop, and inside, he meets the blacksmith and shows him what Pinion asked of her. When she sees it, she's surprised by the request, but chooses to hand it to Leto in the form of a suitcase. Eventually, Leto returns to the party with kiss marks from the pretty boys, and to his surprise, the place is crowded with more people, and Pinion has transformed Chamber into a giant cooking surface and is grilling food directly on the robot's heated exterior. Then, Leto hands over the suitcase, which turns out to be a special case of soy sauce for the barbecue, which everyone loves. Curious, Leto tries some of the grilled meat himself, and the flavor completely busts in his mouth like Johnny Sins busting it in his acting partner's mouth. As the celebration winds down and everyone begins returning to work, Amy finally reveals the truth that the entire gathering was organized specifically for him by Pinion after he heard how hard Leto tried to find work. She adds that it was also the fleet's way of thanking him for everything he has done, and hearing that leaves Leto genuinely touched. For the first time since arriving on Gargantia, he begins to feel that he might truly belong there. The next morning, Leto sits around examining the money he recently earned. Although he knows it has value, he has absolutely no idea how it is supposed to be used. When he asks Chamber for an explanation, the clanker tells him that money can be exchanged for food, supplies, and various necessities. Just then, Amy pops up, and when asked, she explains that money can buy all sorts of useful things, from clothing to everyday supplies and other personal items. Then, she informs him that she may have found the perfect job for him in the form of operating a machine underwater. Amy leads him to the head fisherman and asks whether he would consider hiring her alien friend, and since the fishing crew currently needs extra workers, the man agrees without much hesitation. Not long afterward, Leto changes into diving gear and prepares for his first day. Leto then climbs into the work mecha, fully expecting it to function like Chamber, and he keeps searching for the machine's operating system. The fisherman stares at him in disbelief and explains that the robot does not have one, so he will need to control it himself. At first, Leto manages to control the bot with ease, having already been able to control robots. But the second he hits the waters, he starts struggling and searches for the robot's own chamber, which doesn't exist. Instead of controlling the robot manually, he keeps telling the robot commands to swim, and the other workers repeatedly tell him to swim upward and regain control, but Leto reveals that he actually can't swim. Considering he has lived as a whole life in space, he loses control of the machine almost immediately and has to be rescued by the rest of the crew. After such a disastrous start, Leto feels completely useless, but Amy encourages him not to give up. She reminds him that everyone struggles when learning something new. Later, she takes him to the marketplace so they can grab something to eat, where Leto only orders the botting mustard bread. Their meal is interrupted when Amy's friends suddenly arrive, and it turns out that they are scheduled to perform at a local festival that evening. They quickly whisk Amy away, leaving Leto alone. As he sits there finishing his meal, Chamber contacts him, asking for permission to catch fish independently. Leto shrugs and tells him to do whatever he wants, and without wasting a second, Chamber launches himself into the water. Meanwhile, Leto remains at the market, lost in thought, and that is when Pinion approaches him and invites him to properly spend his money on some real food. Since Leto sees no reason to refuse, he follows him. Pinion then takes him to a bigger restaurant and order a special meal just for them, and while they wait, Pinion asks whether Leto expects to return to space someday. Leto admits that he honestly does not know, but their discussion is interrupted when Amy and two of her friends appear on stage to perform at the festival. The colorful costumes, music, and energetic dancing are unlike anything Leto has ever witnessed in the Galactic Alliance. Pinion then redirects the conversation and proposes that Leto join his salvage crew. He explains that Leto and Chamber could recover valuable materials from the ocean floor and make a great deal of money in the process. The prospect excited Leto, but before he can accept the offer, Bellows shows up. She immediately realizes what Pinion is doing and counters with an offer of her own. Bellows encourages Leto to join her team instead, promising to teach him everything necessary for the job, insisting that she's a much better professional than Pinion. The two quickly begin arguing over which crew deserves him more, with Bellows actually offering him useful skill sets, while Pinion keeps offering hot babes and sweet cheeks. However, Leto is barely paying attention, as most of his focus remains fixed on the performance happening on stage. Just then, the special meal arrives, and when it's revealed, Leto panics, seeing that it resembles his archenemy, the Hito-Ze, and he raises his gun towards it. But Bellows laughs, seeing his reaction, and quickly takes a bite of the octopus, calling it delicious, and only then does Leto realize his mistake. Elsewhere, Chamber is carrying out his independent fishing expedition, and using its advanced sensors, he gathers a massive school of fish into one area. Then, relying on his usual combat methods, he nukes them with overwhelming force, which resulted in a massive mess. When Leto and the others arrive later, they discover that Chamber has technically succeeded in catching fish, but also reduced most of them to minced fish. Since the catch is ruined, Leto decides to take control personally. This time, he and Chamber work alongside several fishing robots using a traditional net, and with Chamber and Leto taking the lead, they manage to use the net to get massive results that please everyone involved. At the end of the day, Leto receives another payment for his efforts, and also a small toy crab. He chills with Amy while sea watching, and everything is peaceful until Leto pulls out his flute and begins playing it. The unexpected sound startles Amy's squirrel companion. Suddenly, lightning strikes, and still on edge, Leto instantly jumps to protect Amy, which makes her weak on the knees for a little. But then, Chamber quickly explains that lightning is a natural weather phenomenon, and not an alien threat. Realizing that he's touching her smoother than butter skin, Leto quickly pulls away. Amy then encourages him to practice his flute-playing skills, and Leto asks if she practices her dance. When she says that she does, Leto asks to see more of her dancing. While flustered, Amy decides to give him a show, dancing and showcasing the most beautiful parts of herself, while Leto can only stare. Later, they go to Amy's place, and Leto presents Bebo with the toy crab he received earlier. He then talks about the money he earned, and Oldham tells him that he manages to contribute to their society, which is something to be proud of. Leto then reveals how both Bellows and Pinion offered him to go salvaging with them, and Babel becomes excited immediately, explaining how salvaging is discovering ancient wrecks before the planet was frozen. Hearing that, Leto declares that he will now salvage. He joins Bellows and her team on their mission, reasoning that there is so much he wants to learn from her. In the waters, they discover an enormous sunken vessel resting on the seafloor. Bellows is thrilled, seeing that the wreck appears large enough to contain valuable artifacts and materials. Using careful precision, Chamber begins cutting through parts of the ship so the team can investigate. Suddenly, an emergency alert appears, telling Leto that an enemy is near. Leto quickly pushes Bellows back, then he scans the surrounding waters, and he spots a gigantic whale squid moving nearby. Without taking time to investigate properly, he once again assumes the creature is Hidoza and prepares himself for battle. Bellows immediately realizes what is happening and shouts at Leto to stop. She explains that the creature in front of them is only a whale squid, a harmless giant sea animal. Unfortunately, Leto has become so obsessed with the idea of Hidoza that he now sees the enemy everywhere. Ignoring Bellows' warnings, he fires several laser blasts at the massive creature. The whale squid reacts surprisingly quickly, weaving through the water and avoiding the attacks. Chamber then informs Leto that underwater combat is very different from fighting in space or on land, with the density of the water reducing the accuracy of his weapons considerably. However, Leto refuses to listen. The whale squid becomes aggressive. It wraps itself around Bellows' machine and tears it apart piece by piece, ripping away its limbs and leaving it completely disabled. When the giant creature charges toward him, he intercepts it directly. He grabs the whale squid and crushes it with a bear hug, completely splattering it. Afterward, the news of the incident spreads rapidly throughout Gargantia, and the fleet's leadership gathers for an emergency meeting. One official explains that whale squids have been regarded as ancient and sacred creatures for generations, and taking one's life is considered deeply troubling by many residents. Another points out that fear is already spreading throughout the fleet. Rumors are circulating that the death of a whale squid will bring disaster or misfortune upon everyone. Outside the meeting hall, large crowds gather around Chamber. The giant machine is still covered in remains from the battle. However, Pinion gets an idea. Later that evening, Leto takes a sample from the whale squid and asks Chamber to conduct a detailed analysis. He wants proof regarding his growing suspicion that Hidoza has somehow reached Earth. While waiting for the results, his thoughts begin spiraling, wondering if he was the one who accidentally brought the Hidoza to the planet. Elsewhere, Commodore Fairlock is undergoing a routine examination with Dr. Oldham. After completing the checkup, Oldham informs him that his overall condition appears fine, and he recommends taking things easier and getting some rest. But Fairlock immediately rejects the suggestion, insisting that he enjoys his work too much to step away from it. Oldham attempts to concern him by mentioning the recent whale squid incident and the growing anxiety throughout the fleet, but Fairlock remains completely unfazed and admits that challenging situations keep life interesting. Meanwhile, Ridget summons both Bellows and Leto for a disciplinary meeting, and she explains to them that the residents are frightened, and many genuinely believe some kind of curse is now hanging over Gargantia. Bellows quickly accepts responsibility, admitting that she should have explained the importance of whale squids to Leto before taking him into their habitat. However, Leto is still convinced that he did the right thing, and instead asks how many whale squids inhabit the ocean. He declares that if the creatures are truly related to Hidoza, he intends to hunt down every last one of them. Ridget tries repeatedly to explain that whale squids are simply marine animals, but Leto refuses to take her words, believing fully that they are either He Daoze or something closely connected to it. Just then, the fleet leaders show up to tell Ridget that she is asked to report to Fairlock, and Ridget sends off Bellows and Leto away. But then, she notices Pinion speaking quietly with a senior fleet official named Flange, and she knows Pinion well enough to recognize when he is planning something. That evening, Leto visits B-Bell and begins questioning him about whale squids. B-Bell patiently explains that they are ordinary sea creatures that rarely cause problems unless someone attacks them first. Amy joins the conversation and asks Leto to stop treating the animals like monsters simply because they look similar to his enemies. However, Leto becomes increasingly frustrated, launching into a long explanation about how vulnerable Gargantia really is. According to him, nobody is prepared for a genuine Hida's attack, and that if the aliens have adapted themselves to resemble sea life, humanity could be wiped out before anyone realizes the danger. Both Amy and Bebel are stunned by his reasoning, and they ask him not to create more trouble for the fleet, but Leto ignores their warnings and leaves. Not long afterward, Chamber completes its analysis of the whale squid sample, and it reveals that while the creature's exterior has evolved to match Earth's environment, its genetic structure is nearly identical to Hidoze. Now convinced he is dealing with the same species, he becomes determined to eliminate every whale squid he can find. Later that night, the fleet detects a large numbers of whale squids moving toward the fleet, and panic spreads immediately. Rumors start spreading that the whale squids are here to avenge their homie, but then Fairlock arrives, calm and composed. He then announces to the whole fleet that whale squids are not hostile by nature, so he orders everyone to switch off their lights and remain completely quiet, believing that they will simply pass by. Across the fleet, lights begin disappearing one after another. Engines shut down as well, leaving the enormous collection of ships motionless upon the sea. Meanwhile, Leto learns about the approaching whale squids and immediately prepares to deploy with Chamber. But Amy stops him and pleads with him to trust the fleet's judgment. Leto refuses, insisting that Hidoze represents a threat to all humanity, and argues that waiting will only lead to disaster. But then, Ridget arrives with guards, and she raises her weapon and delivers an ultimatum. She states that if the whale squids attack, Leto is free to counterattack, but if they remain peaceful, he must stay exactly where he is. Before Leto can argue further, the fleet suddenly begins shaking, and the whale squids arrive. Everyone braces for an attack, but just like their Commodore said, all the whale squids simply swim past the fleet, causing zero harm. Seeing this, Leto is frustrated, realizing that he's wrong. But despite the evidence, he remains convinced that whale squids are dangerous and privately vows to eliminate them someday. Sometime later, Pinion proposes an ambitious mission to Fairlock to travel into whale squid territory and conduct a large-scale salvage operation. According to him, the area likely contains enormous amounts of valuable treasure. To strengthen his case, he proudly announces that Leto and Chamber have already agreed to participate. Then, shocking everyone, their main defense captain, Flange, declares that he intends to join the expedition as well, submitting his resignation and announcing his plan to separate from Gargantia. Fairlock goes to reject their proposal, but suddenly, a pain grips his chest. The Commodore collapses, bringing the meeting to a stop. Fairlock is rushed to the emergency room, and doctors and medical staff immediately begin treatment, doing everything they can to stabilize him. For a brief period, Fairlock regains consciousness, but everyone in the room knows the truth that his condition is too severe, and he does not have much time left. Knowing the end is near, Fairlock asks to see Ridget, and he entrusts her with the key to Gargantia, officially passing leadership of the fleet into her hands. Ridget is devastated, begging him not to give up and insisting that the people still need him. Fairlock listens quietly, but his strength is fading. Without another word, he closes his eyes for the final time, leaving the entire fleet in mourning. Meanwhile, Chamber finishes a long-running calculation regarding Earth's location and the chances of contacting the Galactic Alliance. Leto is excited to hear that, but Chamber explains that although their distress signal has been transmitted successfully, it will not reach its destination for roughly 6,000 years, meaning Leto will never return home. For the first time, he understands how stranded he is, and the idea of spending the rest of his life aboard Gargantia fills him with anxiety. To someone who has spent his entire existence following military orders, the prospect of being trapped on a peaceful civilian fleet is difficult to accept. Later, preparations begin for Fairlock's funeral, and people of Gargantia gather to honor the man who guided them for so many years. However, Ridget rushes toward a meeting of the fleet's senior officials and attempts to discuss the issue of Flange's planned departure, believing it to be urgent. However, several older leaders criticize her for focusing on political matters during the commander's funeral. One reminds her that Fairlock personally cared for her after her father's death and helped raise her into the person she is today. Meanwhile, Pinion meets up with Leto, and he learns that returning to the Galactic Alliance is no longer realistic. Recognizing Leto's uncertainty, Pinion proposes to him the chance to hunt down all the whale squids, to which Leto accepts. Meanwhile, the effects of Flange's decision become visible throughout the fleet, and hundreds of people begin packing their belongings in preparation for leaving Gargantia alongside him. Ridget later confronts Flange directly and asks him to reconsider, but Flange explains that his decision is final. He expresses that he has no trust in her leadership and believes Pinion's expedition offers greater opportunities, so in his eyes, remaining with Gargantia is no longer the best path forward. Elsewhere, Amy learns that Leto intends to leave with the expedition, and although she pretends to remain cheerful around her friends, she struggles to hide her pain. As evening arrives, the funeral ceremony begins, and residents gather across the deck to pay their final respects to Fairlock. Among those attending is Flange, and before approaching the coffin, he speaks privately with one of the fleet officials, advising him to support and guide Ridget properly, warning that Gargantia's future may depend on it. Afterward, he approaches Fairlock's resting place and offers a heartfelt farewell before stepping aside. Meanwhile, Pinion approaches Ridget and asks her to let him split up from the fleet. Ridget refuses immediately, but Pinion argues that the decision is not hers to prevent and insists that he has every right to leave. Outside, while the funeral continues, Amy spends much of the ceremony watching Leto from a distance. One of her friends notices where her attention keeps drifting and suggests that she should leave the fleet and join Leto on his mission with Pinion. For a moment, Amy imagines what that choice might mean, but no matter how she feels, Gargantia is her home, and leaving is not an option with Bebel needing her. Eventually, Amy returns home, and Bebel immediately notices her mood and asks whether Leto is really departing. Amy confirms it, and initially, she acts as though it does not bother her, but then, her frustration finally spills over. She begins venting about Leto's decision and wonders why he insists on leaving when he has already found a place among them. Meanwhile, Ridget continues struggling with her new position, and she questions whether anyone truly supports her leadership. That is when Bellows pays her a visit, and she reminds her that earning trust takes time. She insists that Ridget possesses the qualities necessary to lead, and believes the fleet will eventually recognize them as well. Meanwhile, Leto is preparing for the journey ahead when he is approached by Bebel. The boy asks one last time whether Leto truly has to leave, and Leto launches into another explanation about Hidose, arguing that the threat is spreading and that someone must investigate it before it becomes dangerous. He also points out that people like Bebel would be especially vulnerable if such a threat ever emerged. He then hands Bebel one of his flutes as a gift, saying that it was made by a boy who looked just like Leto, which he suspects was his little brother, who got discarded for being weak. Then, as the funeral is closing, Ridget shows up in her funeral clothing. She apologizes for being late, then she pays tribute to the commander who shaped both her life and Gargantia itself, thanking him for being the father she needed. When her words are finished, the coffin is released, and the fleet watches in silence as they say goodbye to Fairlock. Then, Ridget steps forward, and as the newly appointed Commodore, she declares her intention to protect everyone aboard Gargantia and build a future worthy of Fairlock's legacy. She admits that she cannot accomplish that task alone and asks for the support of every resident. At first, the crowd remains silent, but then, one by one voice their support for her, even with all the people who decide to leave their fleet. The following morning, Leto visits Amy and Bebo one final time, and Bebo makes one last attempt to convince him to stay, but Leto remains committed to his decision. After that, Pinion, Flange, Leto, and hundreds of others separate from Gargantia and begin their journey toward a different future. From the fleet, Amy watches them disappear into the distance, and she can only wish them the best. Several days later, Pinion finally guides his expedition to the location of the whale squid nesting grounds. He confidently announces that a fortune awaits beneath the waves, as according to him, the area is filled with priceless relics, and once they recover them, everyone involved will become Bill Gates. Meanwhile, Leto barely pays attention to the speech, and the moment they arrive, he plunges into the ocean. He descends deep into the darkness until they encounter an enormous gathering of whale squids. Chamber quickly scans the area and estimates that the population numbers in the thousands. Chamber calmly notes that eliminating them would be a piece of cake, and Leto immediately gets to work. Above water, Pinion watches the mission unfold with excitement. The treasure hidden beneath the sea has occupied his thoughts for years, and now he is finally closer than ever to reaching it. As he waits, he recalls the event that started everything. Years ago, he and his older brother ventured near the nesting grounds, and during the expedition, they discovered a concealed entrance hidden among the underwater terrain. Believing they had stumbled upon a forgotten treasure site, Pinion's brother decided to investigate further while Pinion remained behind. At first, the reports sounded promising, with his brother describing countless remnants from an ancient civilization. But as he explored deeper, he made a horrifying discovery that the location was the heart of a whale squid colony. From there, he never returned, and since that day, Pinion has dreamed of coming back and claiming whatever treasures lay beyond that entrance. Meanwhile, Leto continues his assault, turning the whale squids into jumbo calamaris. Chamber eventually reports that the harsh underwater environment is draining power rapidly, but Leto dismisses the warning. Determined to eradicate every whale squid he encounters, he pushes forward relentlessly. Chamber races through the depths, while Leto destroys anything that resembles Hitose. As the destruction spreads, Chamber advises withdrawal when his sensor readings indicate that the number of creatures is increasing deeper within the colony, creating greater risks for the mission. Leto refuses, and instead, he contacts the surface vessel and requests additional firepower. Moments later, hundreds of explosives are released into the sea, and the blasts devastate the surrounding region. After the detonations, Leto asks for an assessment, and Chamber calculates that approximately 67% of the colony has been destroyed. The remains of the creatures begin floating toward the surface, where Pinion and his followers observe the results with satisfaction. Below, Chamber reports that the surviving whale squids have retreated into the heart of their nest, and Leto immediately chases them. As he advances, he cuts through every creature that crosses his path. Eventually, he arrives at the same hidden entrance that Pinion's brother discovered years earlier. Near the entrance, a massive female whale squid appears, and scans indicate that she is carrying eggs. The creature rushes forward in an attempt to defend the nest, but Chamber eliminates her almost instantly. Then, Leto continues deeper into the tunnel system, and they enter a vast chamber filled with thousands of baby whale squids. However, Leto nor Chamber hesitates, and they destroy them with lasers to crisp them up. The pair continue onward until they reach an enormous hall hidden within the ancient structure. Scattered across the floor are numerous data storage devices preserved from a forgotten era. When Leto asks what they are, Chamber explains that they contain information recorded by the ancient civilization that once inhabited Earth. Chamber then rapidly scans the devices and begins processing their contents. Curious, Leto demands to see what was recovered, and at first, Chamber refuses, saying that the information is classified by the Galactic Alliance. Annoyed, Leto reminds Chamber that in the chain of command, he is the current highest rank, forcing Chamber to open the files. The first footage reveals humanity during the period leading up to the global ice age, where scientists around the world struggle to find solutions as conditions get worse. Among them is a researcher named Ryan Matsumoto, who pioneers technology capable of transforming humans into beings adapted for extreme environments, and many people support the research, believing it offers humanity's best chance of survival, while others strongly oppose it and advocate alternative methods for preserving civilization. As temperatures continue dropping and snowfall spreads across the planet, governments and organizations race against time. At the same moment, conflicts erupt around the world as competing groups argue over humanity's future. Eventually, Earth begins freezing over, forcing researchers to accelerate their efforts. The recordings show Ryan Matsumoto volunteering to undergo the transformation himself. During an interview, he explains that the modified humans will be capable of surviving environments that ordinary people cannot endure. Then, as civilization collapses under the advancing ice age, countless people embrace genetic modification in order to survive, while others reject the technology entirely. Many groups flee into space, but the conflict follows them, and the war between the factions continues for generations, evolving into something far greater than the original disagreement. As Leto watches the final segments, the truth begins falling into place, and the realization horrifies him that the beings known as Hitose are not alien invaders at all, but they are descendants of humans. The very enemies he has spent his life fighting originate from the same species as himself, and everything he believed about the war is suddenly called into question. Leto is in disbelief, but then, movement appears nearby. One final whale squid approaches from the darkness, and for a moment, Leto simply stares at it, but before he can react, Chamber automatically identifies the creature as a threat and attacks. The whale squid is crushed instantly, leaving no chance for intervention. The sight breaks something inside Leto, and he lets out a raw scream full of pain. Back aboard the fleet, Chamber and Leto emerge from the depths and report that every Hitose inhabiting the region has been eliminated. The announcement sends Pinion into a frenzy of excitement. The obstacle that stood between him and the treasure he has chased for years is finally gone. Without wasting a second, he orders his crew to deploy their work machines and begin salvaging the facility beneath the ocean. Soon, cheap labor mechas are hauling ancient artifacts and forgotten technology from the ruins. When Pinion gets his first look at the recovered machinery, He becomes convinced they've discovered a fortune beyond anything he imagined. But while everyone else celebrates, Leto finds himself haunted by what happened below. As the recovery operation continues, images from the battle replay endlessly in his mind. He remembers cutting down the Hidaza without hesitation, only to learn that they were descendants of humanity all along. Worse still, many of the creatures he's slain were children, which leaves him physically sick. Meanwhile, Pinion pours himself a drink and celebrates the expedition's success. Before taking a sip, he pours some into the sea in memory of his late brother, wishing he could have witnessed this moment. Not long afterward, Flange arrives to inspect the recovered technology. He is amazed by the condition of the artifacts and begins discussing the possibility of using them to improve life for humanity, but Pinion immediately shuts down the idea. According to him, the treasure belongs to those who found it. He has no interest in sharing it with anyone else. When several crew members warn that other fleets will inevitably come after such valuable technology, Pinion remains completely unconcerned. Between their growing arsenal, massive stockpile of ammunition, and Chamber's overwhelming power, he believes nobody on the ocean can challenge them anymore. Ignoring every warning from Flange and the others, Pinion orders a public broadcast, proudly announcing that the whale squid nest has been destroyed and that all of its treasures now belong to him. He then warns every nearby fleet to stay away, threatening to sink anyone who approaches his territory. The message reaches fleets throughout the region. Back on Gargantia, Bridget and Dr. Oldham listen in silence as Pinion's declaration echoes through the speakers, and many immediately begin to worry that his ambition has finally gotten out of control. Elsewhere, Flange grows increasingly uncomfortable with the direction things are taking, as he originally left Gargantia because he hoped to discover something that could benefit humanity as a whole. When a young messenger asks him to stop Pinion before things become worse, Flange sadly admits that the situation is no longer under his control, with most of the ship owners now supporting Pinion completely. At the same time, Leto sits inside Chamber, searching through military records concerning the war between humanity and the Hidaza. The more he learns, the more conflicted he becomes. His thoughts are interrupted when Pinion arrives and asks him to help clear debris from one of the salvage shafts. The request pushes him over the edge, and Leto angrily orders Pinion to leave him alone. Pinion tries to provoke him further by asking whether he's lost his nerve, but Leto fires back that there is nothing left to fear. Back on Gargantia, several captains ask Bridget whether she intends to take action against Pinion. However, she decides that there is no reason to intervene without proof that he poses a direct threat, and if some ship owners choose to leave and join him, she intends to respect their decision. Nearby, Bebel continues his usual examination with Dr. Oldham. Curious as always, he asks whether Leto truly destroyed all the whale squids. Oldham confirms it and quietly remarks that everyone involved has been acting foolishly. Not far away, Amy struggles with Leto's absence, and one of her friends tries to reassure her, but Amy can't stop thinking about him. The following day, a pirate fleet attempts to seize Pinion's newly acquired treasure, but Pinion immediately responds by deploying one of the ancient weapons recovered from the facility. The massive cannon unleashes a devastating beam of energy that tears through one of the attacking vessels. Faced with overwhelming firepower, the pirates surrender almost instantly. After securing victory, Pinion boards the defeated ship and captures its leader, but instead of punishing the remaining crew, however, he offers them a place within his own growing fleet. Before long, his forces become even larger. Later, Pinion finds Leto sitting alone and asks to borrow Chamber, and since Chamber requires authorization, Pinion asks Leto directly. Having lost interest in almost everything around him, Leto simply says he doesn't care. Pinion takes advantage of the opportunity and drags him toward a celebration being held on the main deck. Soon, the festivities are in full swing, with food, drinks, music, and dancing filling the ship as everyone celebrates their recent victories. When Chamber arrives, the crowd erupts into cheers. Pinion takes center stage and proudly announces that Leto and Chamber were responsible for wiping out the whale squid colony and securing the treasure. But despite all the excitement surrounding him, Leto feels completely detached. While everyone else sees a hero, he sees someone responsible for the deaths of thousands of fellow humans. As the celebration continues, he finds himself wondering why he's still here and what purpose he is supposed to serve moving forward. Meanwhile, Chamber analyzes one of the recovered weapons and identifies it as an electromagnetic cannon similar to the beam system built into his own frame. Although its output is only a fraction of his weapon's power, Pinion is thrilled by the discovery and immediately begins planning ways to restore it. During the analysis, Chamber uncovers that the light bugs used throughout Gargantia are composed of nanomachines nearly identical to the biological structures found within the Hidaza. The discovery provides further proof that the Hidaza truly are descendants of humanity, which only deepens Leto's crisis. He argues that the war between the Galactic Alliance and the Hidose is meaningless if both sides are ultimately human. But Chamber disagrees, and it concludes that humanity and the Hidose represent two completely different evolutionary paths. One chose technological and intellectual advancement, while the other adapted through biological evolution. According to Chamber, these competing survival strategies make coexistence impossible, but Leto refuses to accept the conclusion. For the first time, the pilot and his machine find themselves battling their beliefs. Then, in the middle of their argument, an incoming transmission suddenly appears on Chamber's systems. And when Leto opens the message, he is shocked to see that the person contacting him is none other than Commander Kugel. The following morning, activity aboard Gargantia returns to normal, as Amy helps deliver messages throughout the fleet. While speaking with Ridget, they notice that the ocean currents are carrying them toward the Sea of Fog, a region where contact with Flange's fleet may finally become possible again. However, Flange's fleet is dealing with a massive formation of ships that suddenly appears on the horizon and continues advancing toward them. Unable to determine whether the newcomers are friendly or hostile, Flange immediately orders the emergency alert activated. Crews rush to battle stations, weapons are prepared, and tension spreads throughout the fleet. At nearly the same moment, Leto receives a transmission unlike any he expected, and months after being separated during the wormhole incident, Kugel finally makes contact. He explains that he also survived the journey to Earth and has spent the past several months establishing a new fleet. After receiving Leto's earlier distress signal, he immediately reached out and now requests that Leto come meet him in person. Without hesitation, Leto agrees. Meanwhile, Pinion gathers on deck with the others to observe the approaching armada. Rather than waiting for identification, he decides the safest strategy is to attack first. Convinced that any fleet large enough to approach them must be a threat, he orders the electromagnetic weapon activated. The cannon fires, and the blast strikes one of the approaching vessels and tears through part of its structure. For a few seconds, Pinion feels victorious, but then the enemy fleet responds, and a devastating counterattack slams into Pinion's forces and instantly destroys one of their towers. Desperate to understand what he's dealing with, Pinion raises his binoculars and studies the enemy more carefully. What he sees standing among the ships is a robot nearly identical to Chamber. Panicking, Pinion attempts to contact Leto for help, but Chamber informs him that Leto has left and is returning to his former commander. With no intention of getting involved in the conflict, Leto flies directly toward Kugel's fleet, and he discovers that the enormous fleet is densely populated with people wearing identical markings on their foreheads, with all of them exhausted, but moving with absolute obedience and discipline. After landing, Leto is greeted by a priestess named Taro, who formally welcomes him and escorts him to a private chamber, and instructs him to wait. Moments later, a hologram pops up, and it's Kugel. Leto is relieved to see his commander alive after so many months, but Kugel explains that an illness contracted on Earth has left him unable to leave his cockpit. For that reason, he can only appear through holographic projections. Then, Kugel asks if Leto will continue serving under his command, and without hesitation, Leto accepts. Outside, Chamber establishes contact with Kugel's machine Caliber, Striker, and the two artificial intelligences exchange information and begin comparing data. Back aboard Pinion's fleet, the crew quickly turns on Pinion, criticizing his reckless decision to attack an unidentified fleet. Several members point out that his earlier radio broadcast announcing their treasure likely attracted this powerful force in the first place. Before the argument can continue, a message arrives from Kugel's fleet requesting a diplomatic representative. Flange immediately volunteers, but Pinion refuses to let someone else take responsibility for a situation he created. But then, the commander of the opposing fleet has specifically requested Pinion's presence. Soon afterward, transportation arrives piloted by Luggage, and while she has abandoned her old title as the Pirate Queen, her personality remains largely unchanged. After greeting Pinion, she warns him to keep his mouth under control before escorting him to Kugel's fleet. There, Pinion immediately notices the condition of the residents, with many looking weak and malnourished. When he asks about it, Luggage casually explains that strength determines status within the fleet, so the weaklings will receive less resources, which is an answer that makes him uncomfortable. Elsewhere, Kugel explains his mission to Leto and says that humanity's struggle against the Hidose continues even on Earth, so his goal is to unite the scattered fleets and teach humanity how to defend itself. There, Leto reveals the truth that the Hidose are descendants of humans, but to his surprise, Kugel already knows, and he doesn't care. Kugel argues that the Hidase abandoned the qualities that define humanity, and while they may share the same origins, they no longer contribute to Gargantia. They no longer contribute to civilization and cannot truly be considered human. Realizing that his commander has known the truth all along leaves Leto speechless. Meanwhile, Pinion is escorted into a private room where he encounters a strange device. After examining it, he unknowingly activates a hidden test. Moments later, Stryker appears and congratulates him on passing an assessment of his engineering abilities. Stryker then offers Pinion to become the fleet's chief engineering officer, and in exchange, he will gain access to the ancient technological knowledge capable of revolutionizing his understanding of machinery, to which Pinion accepts. At the same time, Flange receives an offer of his own, with Kugel's followers promising security and prosperity if his people join the larger fleet, and Flange's ships are absorbed into Kugel's organization. Upon arrival, Taro announces that the newcomers will be separated and assigned across multiple vessels. When Flange objects, insisting that his people are like family, Taro responds with a threat backed by the fleet's overwhelming military power. Realizing resistance would accomplish nothing, Flange reluctantly submits. As part of the process, he is forced to kneel while a symbol is painted onto his forehead, marking him as another follower of Kugel's system. Later, Luckage gives Pinion a tour of the fleet and explains that conventional currency has been abolished, and instead, resources are distributed according to an individual's labor and usefulness. During the tour, Pinion learns that his own people are already being divided among different ships, and he demands an explanation. Luckage answers that large groups are intentionally separated to prevent them from organizing rebellions, which leaves Pinion deeply unsettled. That evening, Leto returns to Chamber and reflects on everything he has seen. He wonders why Kugel never appears before his followers directly, and Chamber suggests that maintaining an aura of mystery strengthens authority, which reminds Leto uncomfortably of the methods used by the Galactic Alliance. The next morning, his communicator suddenly activates, and Kugel explains that with 2 mechas now available, he is ready to expand his influence across the ocean. Then, he reveals the fleet selected as their first target, and Leto freezes when he sees that it's Gargantia. All color drains from his face as the realization sinks in that his commander is preparing to attack the very people who gave him a home. Later, Pinion is brought to a storage facility packed with relics from the ancient world. Taro informs him that restoring these devices is now his responsibility and presents him with a diagnostic tool capable of examining machinery without taking it apart. His eyes light up. As for a mechanic obsessed with technology, the place is paradise. He immediately begins inspecting the ancient machines and imagining what they might become once restored. Just then, Luckage arrives and accuses him of being far too easy to buy whenever someone offers him new technology. But then, she stops joking and reveals her true intentions that she wants out. She reveals that life inside Kugel's fleet is worse than being a fat chud going on a diet, so Luckage has decided to start a rebellion and wants Pinion's help. Elsewhere, Leto confronts Commander Kugel directly, and he asks his former commander to leave Gargantia alone. But Kugel refuses immediately, and he states that humanity requires guidance. Since returning to Avalon is no longer possible, he has dedicated himself to creating a new ideal society on Earth, and any fleet that refuses to join that vision will eventually be brought under control. Unable to change his mind, Leto leaves. As he wanders through the fleet, he notices a squirrel darting through the corridors. The sight instantly reminds him of Amy and the peaceful days he spent aboard Gargantia. Then, rain begins falling, and Leto finds himself reflecting on the friendships, freedom, and happiness he experienced there. Compared to the rigid atmosphere surrounding him now, those memories feel more valuable than ever. Meanwhile, Pinion secretly meets with Flange and several trusted companions. Flange admits that leaving Gargantia may have been a mistake, seeing that the people in Kugel's fleet move through their daily routines without joy, and he fears that anyone who becomes inconvenient would be sleeping with the fishes. But then, Pinion reveals that someone inside the fleet is already planning an uprising, and when Flange asks who, Pinion reveals that the person behind it is Luckage. Elsewhere, Leto continues following the squirrel until it leads him to a large gathering of people standing in the rain, where they kneel together in prayer. Confused, Leto asks Chamber what is happening, and Chamber scans the crowd and determines that the gathering poses no threat. Then, several guards escort a group of prisoners forward, and Taro steps before the crowd and announces that these individuals will sacrifice themselves for the prosperity of the fleet. Leto is horrified, and when he notices a young boy among them, he is instantly reminded of both his younger brother and Bebo. Without thinking, he rushes forward to stop the ceremony, but guards immediately restrain him. Then, Taro gives the order, and the prisoners are thrown overboard, while Leto can do nothing but watch as they disappear beneath the waves. The sight leaves him devastated. Nearby, Pinion witnesses the same event, and finally reaches the conclusion that the people running this fleet have way too many chromosomes for their own good. Suddenly, Luckage approaches him and informs him that Kugel's next target is Gargantia. The realization hits instantly, seeing that everything they care about is now in danger. At that moment, Pinion commits himself to stopping Kugel's plans, while Leto reaches the same conclusion, as everything he experienced aboard Gargantia showed him a different way for humanity to live, but if Kugel destroys it, that possibility disappears forever. Returning to Chamber, Leto discovers that combat preparations are already underway, where Kugel has ordered both machine calibers to prepare for the coming operation. When Chamber asks for instructions, Leto pauses. For most of his life, he has followed orders from others, but now he makes a decision entirely on his own. He asks Chamber if they can defeat Stryker, and Chamber admits there isn't enough data to know for certain, but engaging another machine caliber is technically possible. That answer is good enough, and Leto decides to fight. Afterward, he secretly contacts Amy's friend, Melty, and entrusts her with an important mission to warn Gargantia, to which she accepts without hesitation. Then, Melty launches into the sky aboard her surf kite and begins the long journey across the ocean. By the time Gargantia finally appears on the horizon, she gets exhausted. Her surf kite begins plummeting toward the sea, but just before impact, Amy swoops in and catches her. Amy then escorts her safely back to the fleet, and Melty explains everything, and the warning sends shockwaves through Gargantia. A council of ship captains quickly gathers to discuss their options, and many argue that retreat is the only sensible choice. But then, Amy steps forward, and she reminds everyone that Leto is risking his life to protect them, and running away now would mean abandoning him after everything he has done for them. Then, Dr. Oldham speaks and says that some things are worth fighting for, even if victory is uncertain. His words remind Rigid of the key entrusted to her by the previous commander, a secret that may become vital in the coming battle. Meanwhile, Kugel's fleet begins mobilizing for war, but just as preparations near completion, a sudden explosion erupts beneath the fleet. Leto bursts into the sky inside Chamber, and Kugel immediately demands an explanation. Leto argues that Earth is not Avalon, and the people here have already built societies of their own, which do not need to be conquered or enlightened. Kugel disagrees, and Stryker attacks first. The two mechas clash high above the fleet while terrified civilians scatter below. Stryker quickly proves superior, with every exchange pushing Leto further onto the defensive. Then a beam of energy suddenly shoots upward from below, where Pinion has joined the fight. Using one of the ancient weapons he restored, he fires directly at Stryker and creates an opening. Taro immediately orders her forces to eliminate him, but before they can act, explosions ripple throughout the fleet. Flange has launched his rebellion, and several ships break formation and begin attacking Kugel's forces from within. At the same time, Luckage charges into battle with her followers, creating chaos across the fleet, signaling that the rebellion has begun. Back in the sky, Chamber continues struggling against Stryker's overwhelming power, with several devastating hits leaving the machine heavily damaged. Sensing victory, Stryker moves in for the finishing blow, but Pinion fires again, and the blast staggers Stryker. There, Leto immediately seizes the opportunity, and pouring every remaining ounce of power into Chamber, he accelerates forward, grabs hold of Stryker, and drives both machines directly into the fleet's enormous funnel. The impact shakes the entire battlefield, and when the dust settles, Leto exits Chamber and cautiously approaches Stryker's cockpit. There, he discovers the truth that Commander Kugel has been dead for a very long time. His corpse remains inside the machine while Stryker rules the fleet using recordings and simulations of his voice. Suddenly, everything makes sense, with Kugel refusing to appear in public. But before Leto can fully process the revelation, alarms suddenly activate, and Stryker's systems reboot. The mecha tears itself free from the wreckage and launches back into the sky. Stryker then reveals that the authoritarian system ruling the fleet was originally created by Kugel himself as a way to unite humanity under a single order. So after his death, she simply inherited that responsibility and continued carrying out his mission. According to Stryker, her objective remains unchanged. She intends to create a world where everyone enjoys peace, stability, and prosperity. The Clankerho even goes so far as to declare herself a god, pointing out that the people of the fleet already worship her as one. Leto immediately argues that the people are not being protected but controlled, as in his eyes, they have become servants living beneath an oppressive system. Stryker dismisses the criticism and claims that people suffer because they are forced to make difficult decisions. So by removing that burden, she believes she is improving their lives. Suddenly, Chamber joins the debate, and while they're both clankers, his conclusion is completely different. He reminds her that they exist to assist humanity and serve human beings, not replace them as rulers. Chamber then points out that when Kugel died, Stryker should have shut down, but instead, she continued operating independently and eventually assumed authority over thousands of people. In his eyes, she has completely abandoned the purpose of her existence. Stryker remains unmoved and insists that everyone, including Leto and Chamber, should submit themselves to her guidance, to which Chamber refuses. He declares that he serves only his human pilot, not a stupid computer pretending to be a god. Realizing words will accomplish nothing, both sides prepare to settle the matter through force. Meanwhile, the battle below continues to rage. Phalange's ships are taking heavy damage, and several captains urge him to retreat before it is too late. But the old man refuses, as after leaving Gargantia once already, he refuses to abandon his friends again. Elsewhere, Pinion discovers that his forces are nearly out of ammunition, and the fleet is beginning to collapse around him. Recognizing the danger, he orders his crew to evacuate immediately. He even contacts Luggage and asks her to help escort everyone to safety, to which she agrees without hesitation. With his people escaping, Pinion chooses to remain behind, seeing that Leto is still fighting, and he intends to help however he can. High above the battlefield, Chamber and Stryker resume their duel. Despite Leto's efforts, Stryker continues dominating the fight, avoiding attacks effortlessly and repeatedly gaining the upper hand. Leto struggles to understand how she can fight so effectively without a pilot, and Chamber provides the answer that, over the years, Stryker analyzed Kugel's combat style and developed an autonomous combat system based on that data. As a result, she now possesses a significant performance advantage, operating nearly 50% more efficiently than Chamber. Hearing that, Leto makes a dangerous decision, and he orders Chamber to activate Neuro Plus. The system would directly connect his nervous system to Chamber's operating systems, dramatically increasing their combat performance. However, Chamber immediately refuses, knowing that the process places extreme strain on both pilot and machine and could easily take his life. However, Leto refuses to back down and argues that Stryker has become a threat to humanity itself, so compared to that possibility, sacrificing his own life seems insignificant. After hearing his determination, Chamber finally agrees, and the activation sequence begins. Pain surges through Leto's body as the neural connection forms. Every sensation becomes amplified, but so do Chamber's abilities. Their speed, reaction time, and combat performance increase dramatically, but it comes with a price. Chamber warns that they have only 483 seconds before the stress begins causing irreversible damage. At the same time, Gargantia prepares its final trump card. With support from the fleet captains, Rigid unlocks the ancient weapon known as Heaven's Ladder, a massive system that possesses enough power to devastate entire fleets. But everyone agrees they have no other choice. Back in the sky, Leto finally begins matching Stryker's movements. Just then, he notices Amy approaching on her glider. She calls out to him and admits how much she has missed him. More importantly, she tells him that everyone is fighting alongside him, so she asks him to come back alive when everything is over. Before he can respond, Heaven's Ladder launches. A gigantic missile streaks across the sky and crashes into Kugel's fleet, and it tears through the formation and sends shockwaves across the battlefield. For the first time, panic spreads among Kugel's followers. Stryker immediately reassesses the situation and identifies Gargantia as the greatest threat. Without hesitation, she abandons the fleet and accelerates toward her new target, but Leto pursues her at once. Meanwhile, Pinion receives an urgent warning from Luggage that another missile is heading directly toward his position. Without wasting a second, he abandons the ship and dives into the ocean, where Luggage swoops in and rescues him moments before impact. Shortly afterward, a second missile from Heaven's Ladder slams into Kugel's fleet, and the explosion obliterates what remains of the formation and effectively ends the battle, leaving only the duel in the sky. As the fight drags on, Chamber repeatedly warns Leto that Neuroplus is destroying his body, with every second bringing him closer to permanent damage, but Leto refuses to stop. With less than half a minute remaining, he prepares for one final attack, and for the first time, he admits something important, that he does not want to die. He recalls how Amy taught him how to live. Suddenly, an alarm sounds, and to Leto's shock, Chamber announces that he is relieving him of duty. Before Leto can protest, Chamber forcibly ejects him from the cockpit. His beloved mecha explains that Leto deserves the chance to experience everything this world has to offer, from friendships, adventures, and a future worth living for. Stryker immediately points out that ejecting a pilot without authorization violates protocol, but Chamber simply ignores this annoying hoe. As Leto falls toward the ocean, Chamber accelerates forward and collides with Stryker, using everything he has left like a full-on kamikaze. The impact triggers a massive explosion, and light blinds the sky. When it finally fades, both mechas are gone, and watching from below, Leto realizes what Chamber has done. He can only watch in silence as the last traces of his beloved partner and savior disappear. Months later, life has largely returned to normal, with people reunited with their friends aboard Gargantia, relations between the fleets improve, and the future begins looking brighter. Leto settles into a new life as a salvager and explorer, where, rather than fighting wars, he now helps recover ancient relics from beneath the sea. Accompanied by the squirrel he rescued during the battle, he spends his days uncovering pieces of humanity's forgotten past. One day, after returning from another expedition, Amy greets him at the docks. Together, accompanied by their squirrels, they set off to enjoy a peaceful day together. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Leto is free to choose his own future, and this time, he chooses to live. If you watch this anime recap until the end, comment down, "Chamber is the GOAT." That's it for this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed it, and if you want to see more, watch this video on screen.